I'd like to bring a meeting of November 3rd to order. Ask if anybody besides LCAT is recording this meeting. If so.
Shirley?
I'm sorry. Shirley Tancredi for the minutes. I was just trying to position this because I wanted
Okay.
just to feel it.
Okay. I'd like to review and approve the minutes of the meeting of October 21st, 2014.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And at this point, we'll turn it over to the superintendent's report.
Thank you. The first thing I have in my report is catching up on the monthly budget status report through the end of October, through October 29th. I believe that's the first table that you'll have in your packet after the minutes. Very similar trends to what we've talked about in previous months. We're tracking well compared to this year, as well as compared to the percent that we're into the fiscal year. We're at 32.5% of the fiscal year at this point, and in general, our budget's all tracking at or below where they were last year and at or below the percent of the year expended. The differences are the same differences that we've talked about before, and one is in the building maintenance department, not on the salary side of the department, but on the expense side of the department, primarily to the expenditures, to the unplanned expenditures we had at Birchland, about a $20,000 capital expenditure that we've advised the Appropriations Committee of. Our energy percentage looks good, but as we've talked about before, I expect that's going to start trending upward as we get into the heating season. There is, if you're looking at the numbers, you'll note that there is a bit of a difference in our electricity budget in terms of what we have spent year to date this year versus last year, and we're starting to drill into that. We do look on a monthly basis on the consumption on a building by building basis, and we have seen at least one of the school buildings, for a reason we don't yet know, has trended up higher than it had last year, and we're starting to dig into that to see what the explanation is, and to make certain
What are they doing different? They run a different program or something?
We were thinking, we looked at a September bill, and September we were still in the air conditioning month, so we were thinking that it had to do with some additional air conditioners, portable or window-mounted air conditioners that have been added over the past couple of years, and perhaps not having the air conditioners turned off at nighttime as they should be. So, the first thing that we do is we reach out to the users of the building. We apprise them of what we see for energy trends, so they can start paying attention to things and making certain that they do what they can do to cut back on energy. And then, if they don't know about it, they won't do anything about it. But if we make them aware of it, at least, we get them involved. And as I said, we're now looking to see, is there something we can put our fingers on that is causing the usage to be different at that particular school. We do expect to see our bills increase. Even if our consumption doesn't increase, our transmission costs do increase. Our supply costs are fixed through November of 15, but the transmission continues to increase. So for the same amount of kilowatt usage, we will see a trend upward. We are starting to get into the gas season. That you can see those numbers are starting to come up a little bit. The disposal budget, that's a trend that we've talked about before, that we minimally this budget season going in, as we have increased the transfer station fees, we also have to increase the transfer station budget to go along with that. We are seeing heavy use of the transfer station, and that results in heavy disposal costs, and that's primarily what that number is. That's primarily taking bulky waste material and taking wood waste out of the transfer station is our primary cost by far. There's a very small piece of labor there. That's constant. That isn't an issue.
Doesn't change.
It's strictly the number of roll-off containers that we fill up on a Wednesday and Saturday basis these days. Sewer budget and the water budgets look good, and again, as we talked about previously, a big part of that on the expense side is the true-up that we saw from Springfield. That was sort of a one-time pickup at the beginning of the season that'll dampen out as we go through the season. Staying on financial items, I wanted to make the board aware that myself and Sarah Menard, our new town accountant, spent a day in Wellesley last week at an all-day seminar regarding enterprise funds. The timing of it was pretty good because both of us are going to be going through setting up the new enterprise funds for the water and sewer fund. The The primary thing that I wanted to make the board aware of is that the way that the enterprise funds are going to be presented to town meeting will be significantly different than other budgets are presented. You're essentially presenting a balance sheet to town meeting. And I provided a couple of examples, a couple of slides that have been presented during the presentation, and I, quite honestly, that other than the title, the slides are identical. So if you try to compare one to the other and try to find a difference in the numbers, they're essentially the same. What you're really doing is you're taking a look at showing anticipated revenue and showing anticipated expenses and putting that as part of the town meeting motion. At this point, the non-enterprise fund appropriations, the town meeting strictly focuses on the expenditure portion of the balance sheet and not the revenue portion of the balance sheet. We focus on the revenue portion of the balance sheet as we're setting rates, but it is not necessarily part of the town meeting vote. The enterprise fund, again, requires you to look at the entire business, basically, and put all that in front of the voters and have them vote upon, what you anticipate on both sides of the expenditures and the revenue. A couple of things that were talked about in terms of how we have been anticipating moving forward with the enterprise funds in terms of how indirect costs get handled. It's clear that pretty much every enterprise fund carries the indirect costs associated with the employees and the equipment in the associated with the enterprise fund, the people, the health benefits, the retirement benefits, etc. There are some enterprise funds that are used by communities to support other departments. There are some enterprise funds that bill other departments for services provided for those other departments, whether it's water bills, sewer bills, things like that. There are some communities that do what we have proposed doing, which is basically not look to reach to other departments to support the enterprise funds, but not also look to other departments to be supported by the enterprise fund. So we, again, what we have talked about doing and we're put in front of the Board of Selectmen is done by some communities, is entirely appropriate, and is certainly the approach that communities can take if they choose to take. The other thing that the enterprise fund, because again, we're looking at the revenue and the expense portion of the equation at town meeting, we may ultimately want to, or we may decide to vote on setting rates in advance of town meeting so that the revenue portion of the equation can be established. It's, in order to anticipate revenue for next year, you kind of need to know what you anticipate you're going to be billing water and sewer for. It wouldn't change when those rates become effective. You'd still be looking at effectiveness at the beginning of the fiscal year, but it would be helpful to do that in advance of projecting revenue instead of after projecting revenue.
We'll know what the water rates are going to be, right? We already know what the water rates are going to be. Have they given them out yet?
The water rates for fiscal 15 are in effect now.
Right.
The water rates for fiscal 16.
16. When will we get those from Springfield?
Oh, the Springfield numbers. We will typically get that by the end of the calendar year, what they're projecting.
For 16.
For 16, yes.
By the end of this year.
That's correct.
So when do we need it? We usually do it in April. When do we need to do it in order to get it into this? February?
Probably March, again, as we're drafting the final town meeting article, I guess it'll depend a little bit this year because it's going to be the first year when the actual line-by-line numbers need to be filled into the town meeting. It's probably no earlier than February, maybe March, but in that type of time frame. Right. And again, I think by then we'll have the information we need, the primary information, which is what the billing from bill and payment to Springfield would be.
So we'll just move our decision up to February or March then?
Correct.
Yeah.
We usually vote in April. We have our rate hearings in April, typically have.
Right.
We'll just move them to February or March.
Right.
And we know what
At least on the water and sewer.
main.
Yeah.
We don't need the other.
What's that, Dan?
At least in the water and sewer, we can set those rates. We don't have to set all the other rates. We can if we want to, but at least we'll concentrate on the water and
Right.
sewer by then, and we can do the other in April if we want,
Sure.
or do it earlier.
Right.
Because usually we know in advance what the numbers look like.
Right.
And we'll know what streets we want to change water lines on, right?
Yeah, based on the capital improvement plan, obviously we will not know if town meeting actually approves those articles, but we will develop a budget to support the capital costs associated with that.
All right, so it's not, we can be able to do that, no problem.
Right. So again, it's a little bit different approach, again, more similar to what you'd see in a business with a balance sheet, where you're reporting, expenditures as well as revenue. And that gets presented to the town meeting voters, from an idea of complete transparency. Here is the business, here's the income that comes into the business, here's the expenditures that the business incurs.
And so this capital outlay line will be interdependent on capital items that are presented?
That's correct. Although it all depends on how those capital items are intended to be funded. If they're going to be bonded, a big piece of the capital, actually debt services, debt service is a separate item, so that's old capital. Decisions will have to be made whether we're going to fund something based on the annual capital budget or if it's going to be bonded, so we're then carrying a smaller debt service per year to carry that forward.
Okay.
So, fair amount of work to be done, particularly with the new town accountant coming into a new system, but pretty confident we can work it out over the next few months. Let's see. Next item I wanted to bring to the board's attention, and this, again, as we've talked about, is somewhat of a shared item between the Board of Health and the Board of Public Works. The Mass DEP did, and there's a handout here that sort of summarizes the key points, a memo from Dan Murphy to myself. There were actually two separate letters from Mass DEP or two separate approvals that were received. One was approval of what's known as the comprehensive site assessment, which is basically the document in which DEP tells you what you have to do to continue monitoring that historical landfill. How do you need to maintain it, basically, from an environmental standpoint, from a water quality standpoint. And then the second approval was relative to the post-closure use of the landfill, which is really where the Board of Public Works has the greatest interest in terms of what we do on top of the ground. Some of the points in the comprehensive site assessment approval was that DEP remains concerned because there was some talk somewhere down in past years of potential development to the north of the landfill. If there is development that comes and starts to encroach on the landfill property, the closer and closer development gets between, I think there was a roadway that was proposed at one point between the landfill and the quarry ponds, and that had DEP, or driveway, I believe, to housing project that was being floated out there several.
Carr did that a few years ago.
Yeah.
Over Brownstone?
Yeah.
Right, and that had the state a little bit concerned because you're starting to put people in proximity to landfill or historical landfilling activity. So they just noted that, if there's encroachment in the future, they're going to be concerned about that. No further investigation needed. There needs to be something called a record of operations, which is basically a document that goes on file that says we have a landfill and here's roughly the extent of the landfill for, perpetuity. So anybody that is working near or adjacent to the landfill is aware of that, and that document goes on file in the land records. They are requiring one additional monitoring well to be installed north of the bulky waste area, which is the area to the north of the site closest to the quarry pond. They will require, and this is clearly a Board of Health requirement, that the town start an annual water quality monitoring program. And actually, we have had some discussions already with the Board of Health, and we'll be having further discussions. I did see that, thank you. Wishful thinking. So a lot of these are sort of caretaking type requirements as the landfill goes forward. There's gas monitoring of the gas wells near the landfill. As you may or may not be aware, the town currently monitors gas wells around the fire station, around the landfill.
Right.
There's a couple more existing wells that will have to monitor it as part of the caretaking in the landfill.
Will we add more wells?
No need other than that couplet of wells.
Just that one up there?
Yeah, and that's built in, and we'll talk about it when we get to capital, but we have added a small amount of capital to the landfill capital item that the Board of Health is going to support to cover the cost of those wells.
So we pretty much got almost a whole nother year to deal with this.
We have several years. DEP is 100% in their approval letter talks about activities going through fiscal 18 into 19. So we have the ability to get things started this next fiscal year, but we don't have to get it all done this next fiscal year.
Right. And Dan's familiar with all of this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So the second part of this memo really talks about where kind of our greatest involvement is, which is the post-closure, the use of the landfill. They have approved it to continue to be used as a transfer station, as a compost facility, and as storage of DPW materials and hardware is necessary. As we've talked about in the past, we have to construct pads to put our composting operation on so that we don't disturb the cap underneath the pads. Any areas that we are doing storage like that, DEP is going to require us to have a buffer between the landfill cap and the activity. So if we have other stockpiles and things like that, we'll have to construct a pad, for a working pad, basically. As we talked about, the actual landfill closure activities are approved to be done in 2 phases over the next 4+ years. Really 15 inches of low permeability soils, silty material, using the on-site material we hope or expect, and then topsoil. Nothing particularly exciting or innovative there. Couple more test pits, there's some QA/QC requirements, there's some certifications that have to be done, but no real surprises, everything that we expected.
Awesome.
Is Dan going to be looking at this?
Definitely, yeah, Dan, that's one of the areas that he's extensive experience in, so he's really going to manage this whole project going forward.
Yeah, he's worked on quite a few of those projects,
Right.
from what I
Yeah.
understand.
And my goal, he'll be directly overseeing our staff as they're working out there on site in terms of setting lines and grade and things like that, so at the end of the day, he'll be the individual that has to certify the work was done in accordance with the approval.
It's good.
Awesome.
I did want to note that we have a new hire. I'm going to say tentative, but almost definitely coming in a week from Monday. Did receive confirmation today that he has all his licenses in place at this point, so I think the last item that he needed to get taken care of has been taken care of, so we're, again, tentatively looking to have him come on board next Monday. Interesting background, and I know Mr. Wilson has seen his resume. He grew up in Springfield and has basically come back to Springfield recently. He spent 4 years in the Coast Guard as a master mechanic in the Coast Guard, has really seen a lot of different things there, working on a ship for a number of years. Spent several years working as a mechanic on a yacht, basically on a 105-foot yacht that cruised up and down the coast of the U.S. So he's a guy that's learned how to keep things working and maintain things and really get things done. The last couple of years, he's been working for a large Florida wastewater utility, working as a pumping station operator within that Florida utility. So he's picked up some very good hands-on water and wastewater experience as well. So
Licenses?
he has all his
Florida-
licenses.
Florida
placed.
licenses?
His CDL has been transferred to Massachusetts now, and he has his hoisters now in Massachusetts as well.
Does he have wastewater license?
He doesn't currently, I don't believe, just like Massachusetts doesn't require wastewater licenses for pumping station operation, I don't believe Florida does either.
Okay.
But, he is a guy, as we look to the future and transitions of some of our staff that have, key people like Roy Erickson, for instance, that will hopefully be with us as long as he can, but at some point he won't, so we need to be building some staff behind him, and, most likely this guy may be somebody that we work to have pick things up. So I'm pretty excited. As I said, I was very impressed by him, and hopefully he'll be able to meet Mr. Wilson. He's coming into the office on Wednesday to take care of some of his test requirements and things like that, and then if everything works out fine, he'll be with us Monday. And at that point, other than one position that we're currently looking to confirm staffing on, we will be fully staffed at that point.
That'll help if we get a bad winter.
Definitely.
Sounds.
Other items, the II project that we bid probably a month, almost 2 months ago now. After talking with several contractors and reevaluating the project, we are going to put it back out to bid. We are going to publish it for documents being available on November 12th, and the bid's opening on December 5th. In talking with at least one contractor, it was really an issue of timing. He was very interested. He just got into the bidding process very late, and he said, without a doubt, if I had 2 or 3 more days to look at this, I would have come in right where you expected the pricing to be, and I would have been very competitive. So, we're optimistic now that we're getting a little bit out of the construction season. Some of the guys that we thought would be bidding on this project are now able to have the time to look at it and be more interested for a spring project versus something that was going to be a fall project.
Right.
I'll touch a little bit on operations issues since Mr. Collins isn't with us tonight. As you're probably seeing, there's been quite a bit of activity with our DPW crews on Hunting and Millbrook. We have all of the water main installed except about the last 200 feet. We have the water main down Hunting and onto Millbrook Circle fully in service at this point. It's been flushed, disinfected, tested. We have about a half a dozen water services now that have been shifted over to the new main. We have another 1,500 feet of pipe that's installed that has been pressure tested and passed the pressure test and has been flushed, and we're just waiting for the results of the biological testing. And if that comes in tomorrow, we'll be at the position where we can then start tying services into that section as well. And I'm optimistic we'll get it completely done this fall. I went into it thinking if we get the main line done this fall, we're going to be doing well and we can come in the springtime and connect the services. But it's looking right now that if everything tests out fine tomorrow, we can hit that project with a couple of crews and bang the services out.
How many services in total?
I'm going to estimate probably 25 or so. Not a huge number of services. And if we get 2 crews out there, two crews combined can do 6, 7 a day.
Yeah.
So it's, another week or two, we could have that wrapped
all
up.
switched over here.
Right. In addition to that, we've been working on continuing to get our equipment ready for the wintertime. We are ready to go if it does snow. We do have salt in the salt shed. We have received our contract back from Eastern Minerals, so we are in a position now that we can start procuring additional salt, if we see fit. And I expect we will, just to make certain we get a little bit ahead of the curve. So we won't fill the shed necessarily, but we certainly want to be able to get enough salt on hand to get us a good way into the season. So if supplies run short, we're not behind. I think with that, I'll turn things over to Bruce.
A couple things for the board this evening. About 3 months ago, we did notice we had a slight fuel leak in our generator here at the service building. We did rectify that as of today. It took about 8 weeks to get the new double wall tank in. Like you said, last week, swapped it out on Friday, did all the connections and everything today. Got it up and running, so we are back in business here at the yard.
Was that tank in containment?
The existing unit, the existing tank was installed in 1993. And just the placement of the unit sitting on the ground out there on the side of the building. We have salt trucks coming in and out all day, so I'm sure that added to the deterioration of the old tank. The old tank was a single wall tank, didn't meet today's current codes. The new tank is a double wall tank, so you have that, I guess that security, if something should happen to the interior tank, it would leak obviously in that interstitial space, and we do have an alarm that goes off if something should go wrong.
Was the old tank in some type of containment?
We drained the tank, we pumped it out, it's all clean, it's actually in our metal scrap pile right now, so we will be disposing of that with our other metal materials.
But there wasn't a release?
No, there was a slight release, but it was very minor.
Yeah.
When we did find it, it was actually during exercise mode that it actually leaked a little bit. I mean, it was maybe, I don't know.
A stain more than that?
Yeah, more of a stain, and we put some containment up around it with berm and kept an eye on it with, obviously, with some absorbing material. And took the unit offline and kept an eye on it and obviously pumped out the tank, so there was really, I don't know, maybe a gallon left in the tank as it sat there. So like you said, we got that online today, and it's back up and running. Another project that's almost complete, it's about 99% complete, is the chiller project at Bertram Park. Final connections and installation of the unit happened last week. We did have a minor shutdown of the facility on October 18th. We did find some electrical problems with the old unit. The existing breaker was way oversized. It was a 300 amp breaker. Feeder wires to the old unit were undersized. So we corrected that issue during a shutdown, put the appropriate size breaker in, which would be a 200 amp breaker, and ran all the electrical control wires and everything else. So we're looking to commission that new unit this week. So just as just informational, the existing unit, if something did happen to it, the breaker would not have tripped out.
Nice.
So, like I said, that project should be complete this week. Total budget for that project was $65,000. Johnson Controls was awarded that contract for $60,000. And like I said, all the rest of the budget for that was electrical supplies, feeder wire, and control wire. That's it.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Do we have any kind of program where we would, maybe over a period of time, check electrical systems and what's on them?
do
Because
that.
this one comes up as a
Right.
oops. I wonder if there's a pick off the panels one
Sure.
a month for the next 24 months or something. I don't know how many panels are out there that would be worth
Checking into
kind of like what's here and what's there. And I don't know if some of them maybe aren't marked to the outlets and things like that. And
As we do go through, our town electrician, he does identify a lot of the panels, especially in the older buildings. We did do a lot of marking up in panels, especially at Meadowbrook School, because of the age, and we did do the electrical upgrades over there.
Yeah.
So we do identify them, but it'd be a good winter project for a little downtime to actually go through and test and make sure all our labels and everything are correct in all our buildings.
yeah, cool.
Sure.
Awesome.
Okay.
Capital budget.
Do you want to approve FY16 capital projects?
If I can start there, what we're put in front of you is very similar to what you saw at the last meeting. Really, I think only in the building area is probably the only area where we have any significant change, so I'd ask Mr. Fenny to talk about that. We're getting more and more sophisticated. We're not completely there yet, but I did by hand tab each one of the divisions, and that's what these blue tabs are if you want to flip out. So the first blue tab, for instance, is the building division, and probably Bruce, you know, the main thing probably to talk about is the town hall renovations and perhaps the meeting that we had with staff, and actually had some members of the Board of Selectmen sit in on that strictly for informational purposes, and thought we had a pretty good meeting there.
Yep, absolutely. We did meet, I believe it was last Tuesday or Wednesday, showed all the interested parties at the town hall on what we were looking to do. So they were pretty perceptive to what we're trying to accomplish at the town hall. It is a little more expensive than our initial plan that we did come up with in our draft capital project for the town hall. Everybody was in pretty good agreement as far as what we want to do. We're mainly going to be doing the new, I guess you can say, newer part of the building, the 1967 addition section, which would be the meeting room, selectman's office, town accountant's office, and the assessor's office, kind of moving things around a little bit within that space, doing all the hallways over, carpeting, wainscoting, and then all 4 bathrooms. In the initial draft, we did not include 2 of the bathrooms, so that was one of the big differences in some of the pricing that we came up with.
And the thought too was that if we're spending that money to renovate those spaces, you know, the places that the public comes into contact, the corridors, those places like that, it really made sense to spruce those up as well. So that's one of the reasons why some of the pricing came up as well. But
Right.
I think we've come up with a fairly cohesive plan that'll improve the overall experience to the public.
Absolutely. And just like you said, like Bob said, during the construction process, obviously, we're going to be in the offices and everything else, so all that traffic, that demolition material and everything else is going to be going through those hallways. The current carpet in that area is, I believe, about 8 or 9 years old. It's getting worn, so we felt it was necessary to do that part of the project also. And like I said, too, the hallways and everything else, they're a little plain. It's just carpet and walls. We're just going to add a little architectural, I guess, value to the building also, like we did the senior center, along with the meeting room, give that place a facelift, and then all the offices also, and the bathrooms, make those all ADA compliant, ventilation, which they currently don't have any of now, new partitions, floor drains, tile, and you know, a fresh coat of paint on everything also.
So probably, I don't know, I'm going to guess 50% of the meetings I go to, that room is overflowing into the hallway and people are standing up all over the place. Are we going to try and make it so that it's got more capacity for people? Because, I mean, it's kind of...
The meeting room?
Yeah.
It's all full of junk.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, just from a chair count, it'd be kind of nice maybe to see the chair count right now,
Right.
like before the junk goes.
Right.
And then in the new layout, maybe see what the chair count might be.
Right.
Because a lot of the meetings I go to, and I don't go to all of them, so there might be a whole bunch of them where there's nobody there, but a lot of the ones I go to, people are standing, sitting on the windowsills,
Right.
out in the hallway, barely squeaking through the doors to hear what's going on, so.
Right. Yeah, in the current plan that we have in front of you now, it doesn't increase the square footage, but we did address the, I guess, some of the storage in that area. We were going to actually put a partition wall up where those actually used to be closet doors and actually punch through the selectman's office where that storage is actually used for. So we were going to partition that off and then just dress up the room, drop ceiling, lighting, and everything else, and do a little more substantial, I guess, meeting table for that room. But we did not increase the square footage.
And is the lunchroom still in the electrical room, or?
Actually, we did talk about that a little bit. Currently, there's a refrigerator in there and a microwave. That is not going to be moved right now. We believe each department has a microwave or something in their office. We did not have any place to actually make a break room on the existing footprint.
We did talk, you had located a copy room on the first floor next to the new elevator.
Right.
And that has the potential to become a break room as opposed to a copy room, given that most departments are copying within the department. And we kind of concluded with this when we met with the various town departments, was that if the town hall usage increases and the town adds staff in the future or adds departments, a finance director, an HR director, things like that, that's what's going to tip the balance in terms of either having to, really the only space that's left now is the meeting room. That's really what's going to drive the issue of turning that meeting room into space that's used for offices, and then having to deal with doing meetings somewhere else, because there's really nowhere else to go other than making the building. So it's really intended to serve the existing needs that are there now, but any future needs are going to require either finding more space or reusing space that's currently used as meeting space.
Right.
When you get a chance, can you send a copy of whatever the latest plan
Absolutely.
might be?
It should be in your handout here, actually.
Oh,
It's,
all
you're partway in. It's a fold-out.
All right, we don't need to stall tonight, but I'm going to take a look at it.
Yep.
Sure.
Wasn't one of the concerns that people had mentioned was the fact that there was not enough storage space? And, we talked about the basement, now that I think it's dry now where it wasn't before.
There is we did briefly touch on that. Part of this plan isn't actually doing anything down the basement just because of, I guess, the confined space you have down there and actually accessing that basement and the low ceilings. We did talk to the group about reaching out to the state and see if we can get rid of a lot of the material that's down there, and they are doing so, and seeing if we can clean up some of that space, better utilize that space a little bit. But this plan does not.
Electronic storage?
Electronic storage or whatever the department feel is necessary to kind of, consolidate some of our records.
There was an interesting suggestion that perhaps the old fire station could be used as off-site storage as well. It's not far from town
I
hall.
was just thinking that.
Yeah, because that's where we talked about putting the IT, but the IT moved to the school,
Right.
so we've got that, and
So
it's dry.
we turn that into off-site storage.
Yeah.
I mean, would it be secure in the JCs are using it now for the carnival, and they draw power out of there, or no?
They do, but they do draw the power from there, but, well.
I don't think they do. I
No,
think they drop a
they have a
separate
separate
pole.
service out
They
there.
drop a separate service?
Yeah, out where the old swimming pool,
So once
the
they
waiting pool
move,
is.
once they move out of there, it wouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
So I think the key thing is we have everybody moving in the same general direction this year, which obviously is necessary if we want to be able to prevail at town meeting.
Good.
I don't know if there's anything else you want to note again. I think the rest of the building section is the same as it was. We haven't made any modifications to that. The next tab is the equipment tab. All the items on that are the same. The pricing has changed a little bit as we've got updated quotes on some of the items. And, you know, as you...
Who was our liaison this year? Do we know yet?
We don't, it hasn't been identified yet. I spoke to Tom Broderick at town meeting last week, and he wasn't certain if he was going to be the person or not this year. So Jim Broderick, yeah.
Okay.
We don't also, and we do not have a capital planning meeting date as of yet. We do have an appropriation date that's being talked about, but capital planning hasn't yet set a schedule. So we have a deadline of the end of this week of getting these materials to them in electronic form and in paper form. And then I assume once they get the submissions, then they'll get back to us in terms of a meeting schedule. And we did, you know, on the issue of the admin vehicle, you know, the backup in here really documents what I talked about the last meeting, which is we're putting it out there really with the goal of hoping to drive an available vehicle somewhere within the town in lieu of purchasing a vehicle. But if that's not possible, we'll ultimately, we believe, need to purchase a vehicle.
Okay.
The water budget is the next tab. Again, that is identical to what we had presented at the last meeting. And the sewer tab is identical to what we presented last meeting. And then the very last one, again, is the landfill tab. And we did meet with the Board of Selectmen on the 27th. They met again on the 28th. They did vote to sponsor the article. So we will be submitting the sponsor the capital request. We'll be submitting the request on their behalf at the end of the week.
Okay.
What I would ask the board to do is certainly hold on to your own copies for your files. I have 2 additional copies here that if you can sign as the approved copies, one we'll submit to capital and one we'll hold on to for our files.
Do we want a motion to accept the
Sure.
capital budget? All right, I make a motion that we approve the FY16 capital budget.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
I don't think so.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sign away, buddy.
I had one other item to bring up. I mentioned the Appropriations Committee meeting. We originally had a date that's been tentatively rescheduled. They'd like us to meet with them either on the 3rd of February or the 17th. And I don't know that Mr. Burott couldn't meet the 17th, so if it's okay with the rest of the board, I'd suggest I can respond and indicate that February 3rd may or may not be workable for the board.
I think that was good both days. 3rd and 17th?
3rd and the 17th, correct.
As long as it ain't snowing.
Unless you were inviting us all down to the island.
More welcome to that.
He's taking us home?
Yeah. 3rd and 17th, I'm good on both, so.
Oh, okay.
Why do you talk like that about it?
Okay. Can't come soon enough, probably, huh?
Wednesday.
Relative to the next meeting, I'd suggest that we're probably looking either the 11th of November or the 25th of November.
It's Veterans Day. I don't think we can meet on the 11th.
Okay, good point. I meant to say the 18th of November.
Okay.
Sorry. Either the 18th or the 25th.
Good for me.
18 or the 25th?
No,
No.
can't do the 18th. I can do the 25th.
Can you do
25th?
19? Are you what?
19th? Nope.
17th? About the 17th.
17th will work.
Works for me.
17th?
Monday,
17th,
Monday the
17th?
17th?
5 o'clock.
That it? Motion to adjourn to go into executive session, not to return to open session for the purpose of contract negotiation.
Second.
All in favor?
Mr. Berry, aye?
Mayberry, aye.
Mr. Wilson? Aye.